All right, thank you. Welcome to Next Gen December 4th. My name is Tom Reynolds, president of the Reynolds Group, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes. Next Gen is a peer network founded 20 years ago to support manufacturing, distribution, and technology companies. Our mission is to help business leaders adjust, leverage, and thrive. My background is manufacturing and software development. I use this experience as a fractional chief marketing officer to solve clients' sales and marketing challenges and create better sales opportunities, not just leads. Helping me today is Linda Feinholtz. She is a business growth strategist coach, as well as a good friend. Thanks, Linda. We also have Kenneth Dunn. She's my communications director, and she will also be taking notes, and it'll be up on my blog. We welcome questions. Please use the chat or raise your hand. Linda will manage the process to maintain a flow of the presentation. Our speaker today is John Thompson, president of SMPL Mortgage. John's superpower and his passion is for education, and that is the cornerstone of his mortgage business. He also has a passion about planning, organization, time, and time management, and for many years has been offering free workshops to the public. I have attended at least one of his workshops once a year because A, I'm a slow learner, and B, I need help getting organized and getting ready for the next quarter. So with all that, please mute your systems and take it away, John.
Thank you, Tom, very much. I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, the secret to me doing this, quite frankly, is it helps keep me organized as well, because like all of us, we're human and it's hard to kind of keep track of things. And so quite frankly, I'm teaching things, so it keeps me in shape as well. All right, let me get this started here. And welcome everybody. All right. All right. Okay, let me minimize this. I will give you a heads up. You'll need a piece of paper in, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or 12 minutes or so, just to do a quick little exercise, take us a few minutes, but I thank you for being here. And today we're talking about kind of this idea of peak and living with fear. We're in a very unique situation these days. And it, interesting enough, started for me and all of us actually back in late March. So here's my good buddy, Tom, that we all know, on March 17th, 2020, when it began. And this was the very beginning of the lockdown. And Tom's actually the last person I saw outside of my own family or immediate team members that I saw publicly. And as you can see, we were drinking illegally in a park. And so it was a lot of fun, and we hope to do that again very soon. So thank you, Tom, for a very important day in my life. And after that, you know, we all sort of transitioned to this world where the people we could hang out with were our family. It was my kids on the left. And we celebrated good events and things. This is my anniversary with my beautiful wife, Tina, on the right-hand side, on the beach side, kind of north of Malibu, because that's kind of all you could do in late April and May, heading into that kind of time. Then we started transitioning our world to this new world of Zoom, and you have your team meetings. We have family meetings there kind of on the left, and then we had to make really hard choices when we went to the store about what we should buy. As you can see, people there on this side had to make a decision between toilet paper and beer, and you can see that they chose the toilet paper. And then as Zoom grew, it became suddenly okay to have your dog on the screen, and that's kind of cool. And then the meetings were small, and they got bigger and bigger, and that kind of became our world. And it's a different world, and it created some anxiety and fear probably for a lot of people, and that's what we're kind of talking about. But before we get there, I want to talk about where we've been with Tom over the last couple of weeks. And so we always need to reflect back before we go forward, before we plan, before we sort of really dig into what we're going to do next. You know, it's important to maybe look back just a little bit. And so Tom had some wonderful speakers. I'm just going to recap a couple of the ones that I think were important and share some commonalities. And so Bruce Lefetre talked to us about your clients really don't care about us, and he encouraged us to think like your clients. And how does X, when X is whatever you do in your business, how does it improve your client's life? And to think about it that way, to think like them. And then Robin shared with us, Robin's on the call that I saw, shared with us about resilient organizations. And of course, the positive psychology that goes along with running businesses and organizations, and a can-do belief, and to really dig deep and to understand, to know your why. And Jim Twirtle, who's also with us, I think today, talked about innovation from within and how important it is to build creative time into the organization. I really feel like planning is the most creative time you can spend during your time and during your work. And he also reminded us that experience is what clients remember, the experience of working with you and being part of your team, your organization, that group. Then Tom talks about marketing with fresh eyes and really said, what's the most important thing? What's the best thing about your business? And then make that your story. And Tom's a great storyteller. It's a skill that I don't have a high level skill around it, but Tom does a great job with that, and to understand your story and share that story with the world. And then Jeff McCausland and Tom Bostler talks about battle-tested leadership. And they talk about initiative and the OODA loop, which I'd never heard of before: observe, orient, decide, and act. The most important thing being act. They told us that a vision without a task is but a dream. And a task without a vision is drudgery. And a vision and task is the hope of the world. Right? And so the common things through all these things were kind of interesting, that oftentimes our thoughts lead to our choices, and our choices lead to our actions, and our actions lead to our results. So another way of looking at this is, if you're not getting results you're not getting results you expect or that you want, look backwards, right? So if you're not getting good results, look back to your actions, look back to your choices, then look back to your thoughts. So we're going to spend a little time today talking about sort of your brain and thinking about those thoughts and how we're being affected right now in this unique time in our world. And you've probably all heard of the lizard brain, or in this diagram calls it the reptilian brain. But we've heard about the lizard brain. That lizard brain is that part of our brain that just reacts. It's the fight or flight. When something happens, we just react. And it tends to be driven by fear, like fear or hunger, those sorts of things. Then we have the limbic brain. The limbic brain is what controls our emotions, our feelings. And we're sort of moving up the cognitive ladder here to think about how we make decisions. And so now we're in this emotional space. And then you have the neocortex, which is the sort of the rational or the thinking brain. And we'd like to make most of our decisions up in that neocortex part of the brain. But the reality is, because of what we're experiencing right now in the world, many people are kind of stuck. They can't get up to that next level, whether it's emotional or up into the neocortex. They're stuck in this reptilian, this lizard brain part of it. And it's because of this, right? And so I'm not sure who decided that this needed to be the representation of COVID, what we're experiencing. For all I know, this is what they really look like. I have a funny feeling they don't look like this in our bloodstream. But why is that the image? Why is that a fearful image? And why is that kind of out there? I don't know why they publish it that way, but I think it makes us afraid of it. And the less you can look at that, probably the better. So I'm going to ask you, have you kind of noticed that over the last 6-9 months, you keep postponing tasks or projects? Maybe you're being a little too self-critical. Maybe you're getting so obsessed over the results of something that, over the details of a project, that the results are never quite good enough. Maybe you always find an excuse to not do something, and even finding motivation has become challenging. I know I'm experiencing kind of all of this sort of thing right now, as I'm sure many of you are. And then drudgery, right? And just grinding through the day sometimes is a challenge. And we've all heard each other talk about, what day is it? Tuesday? Is it Saturday? We just kind of lose track of it because we're in this kind of odd world right now. And so a good friend of mine, Kat, at her company called K-Shift Consulting, shared this with me, and I thought it was an interesting diagram to kind of share, because many of us own businesses. We have to support the people around us right now. It's not just our families, it's our work families and those sorts of things as well. And this is just a little chart that talks about sort of the energy level and moving through the stages of grief. So we have this shock and denial, we have anger and frustration, and kind of bargaining. And we get down to this bottom level with depression over here. And now our energy level is really low as we're kind of feeling overwhelmed and helpless, and we're consumed with worry. Then hopefully we turn the corner, we sort of just accept it. What does this mean? Where are we going to go from here? And then ideally we get to meaning again in our lives, in our business, and we're peaceful and we're hopeful. And now we're able to make great decisions again. And I ask you, what is normal? And what is normal? What does normal mean to us? I hear people saying all the time, I can't wait to get back to normal. And I'm not sure what normal was for you or for me, or what normal, if that's even a word that should be part of language, because I'm not really sure what normal really means for people, because not everyone seems super happy with what normal was. But here's kind of one thing that's interesting. We're never going back to whatever that was. And the reality is we're not going back to it, and it scares the Jesus out of us. And you may or may not be willing to admit that yet, but I don't think we're going back to normal at all. And so maybe there's this underlying fear and sort of this anxiousness, and maybe fear is a strong word, but it's just anxiousness and concern that's out there right now. And I'm going to encourage you to let's get beyond that and move on so we can plan and become fulfilled again in our lives. So kind of going back to the lizard brain, these are a couple of quotes that I really enjoy from a couple of authors that I read and I like a lot. So Seth Godin tells us, the many you may have read Seth Godin, wonderful marketing books, and he does a daily blog. If you don't read, you should read it. The lizard brain is the reason you're afraid. The reason you don't do all the art you can. It's the reason you don't ship when you can. The lizard brain is the source of the resistance. Resistance is just really another word for fear and so forth. Right, so resistance, Stephen Pressfield, who also is a wonderful author and many great books that many you've heard of, resistance is an active, intelligent, protean, malign force. It's tireless, relentless, and inextinguishable, whose sole object is to stop us from becoming our best selves and achieving our higher goals. That's Stephen Pressfield. And so as we kind of think about how we might defeat the lizard brain, Stephen shares a couple ideas with us. He tells us, do not judge yourself. Do something even if it has defects or it's not perfect. Self-criticism is not allowed because it's part of the resistance. Accept all ideas. There are no standards or rules. The more absurd your ideas seem, the better. Stop making excuses. These excuses that you make, well, they are just excuses. Act first, think later, and then act and reflect. And repeat the process. A work in process generates a magnetic field that grabs you and pushes you to continue working. All right, so I would also question, might it be that we fear opportunity? Opportunity is all around us. It always has been. And so some of the things that I've started noticing with myself is that, we've had a very good year. We've been very fortunate. And I know there's a lot of people that are having challenging years, and that's tough. But there's opportunities even in the darkest of times. And so I'll tell you that maybe we fear opportunity because if we're not taking steps forward, maybe there's something there that we should be thinking about. Another thought that's been kind of pressing on my mind lately is, might it be that success breeds resistance? So again, resistance again is this kind of this maybe underlying fear. And I'll suggest to you that, we fear it because we've done well. If we've always done well, and we've had good years and not so good years and so forth, but generally speaking, we're being successful, however we define that, then one of the things to think about is maybe that in and of itself is resisting us, is causing us to not move forward. And so some of you may have read the book by Malcolm Gladwell, who talked about, I think it was Blink was the book. He talked about becoming an expert at something, and it takes 10,000 hours of study or work to become an expert in a particular field or skill set and so forth. And we reach that level and we become unconsciously competent, right? So I know that within my own business, I've been doing this 31 years, I've reached a point where I feel pretty comfortable with everything we do. And so where do you go from here? Maybe there is resistance because we're just kind of there, and maybe it's not fulfilling this maybe the way it was at some point, right? So that becomes resistance when we start to think that way. So the time that we invest, is really important, and all we really have is time. And here's a couple of quotes that I really like. The most important choices you'll ever make are how you spend your time. Cherish time is the most valuable resource. You can never make up the time that you lose. Instant gratification is the greatest obstacle to the call of your journey. And we know this. We know that being distracted and chasing shiny objects, all those kind of things that we talk about and that run into, really prevent us maybe from achieving and doing the most important work that we're able to do. And then time is the only limitation to all accomplishment. And I really enjoy this sort of idea around truth that's been published by Harvard University, and they call it veritas. And so they define truth or veritas as progressively minimize the magnitude of our veering to one side or the other of the star by which we steer, whose pathway to us is delicately reflected on the sea of life. So I have this interesting charts. We all know we go through life. We're kind of going back and forth, and we're chasing one project, another project, and this idea, and that project, that business opportunity maybe didn't work. And so we're just trying different things all the time, going, left to right. And so I'm going to suggest that planning that I'm talking about today, the sort of idea of planning is really creating guardrails around our life. So these guardrails ultimately create less veering or less steering. So less steering. So now we have, okay, we're not going to go all the way over there. We're going to kind of go a little further. So planning we're talking about today is, I think, these guardrails in your life, and I would encourage you to think about how to put those into place. So why do we kind of plan it all, right? And so planning it all is what those guardrails really are. There's a couple of books that I've read. They're kind of always behind me on my bookshelf here. You can certainly go out and get them and read them. They're valuable reads, but I'll tell you, they all kind of say the same thing. So as I say, there really is nothing new. So all three of these books really talk about how to plan, how to prioritize, and how to sort of get things done. And I'll tell you that, well, the one concept that all of them contain in their writing is this idea of 90-day rocks. And so I'm going to suggest as you go into 2021, 3-year plans are wonderful, 1-year plans are great, but in reality, we don't know what's going to happen next month in our world. We don't know what's going to happen next week or tomorrow. And so I think the furthest out you might want to think about planning is 90 days. 90 days and creating a 90-day rock or priority, we call it a rock, or priorities is important because 90 days is enough time to sort of get a big project done, build a new website, create a new marketing plan, launch something kind of new that you hadn't done before, but not so long that if you don't get it done and it doesn't work, you find out it's not the right thing to do. You haven't really wasted a whole lot of time. And if you kind of get off track in the middle, you're working really well for 2 or 3 weeks, and then something happens, we get locked down or some other thing happens and you kind of slide off to the side, you can get back on track and still get that project down. So all the projects that I work on and my team work on, we kind of have this 90-day rhythm and it works really well. So you got to think about what is most important now. And in fact, the last series of these, Linda Feinholz talked about figuring out what's important right now within your business. And so it's the same thing. We all know what's important. We know what's important, and it's kind of always nagging at us. And so start to think about what's important in your life right now. It can be business, it can be personal. And what's going to make the biggest difference? That's what's the most important thing to think about. What's going to make the biggest difference right now? And so there's 1,000 different things that we can be doing. And so the idea of planning is really about getting it down to a couple of manageable items or rocks or priorities that make the most sense right now, which prevents the oversteer we kind of had in that diagram from Harvard University. Right. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to jump on a little bit of an interactive piece. I want you to get out a piece of paper or maybe a Word document or a notepad or whatever you have near you. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes and we're going to go into this kind of brain dump thing. So this is one of our tools. I'm going to tell you right now that all the tools I'm going to mention here in the next few minutes, I'm going to put in a link. You'll have access to all of them. You can download them all again later on. But I want you to think about what would have the greatest impact on your business right now. We're just going to take 2 to 3 minutes. I want you to brainstorm. Just start writing them down. Don't worry about what they are. Just start writing. And I wish I had some music playing in the background, but I didn't figure that out on time, so we're not going to do it. So go ahead and start now. Just start writing down the things that are important to you. Then we'll talk about how to kind of rank those after that. All right, so go. We'll take 2 minutes. These can be marketing projects, people you want to meet, a new system you want to put in place, some finance goals, just anything. What's most important right now? What would have the biggest impact on your life in the next 90 days? So keep going, get everything out. Doesn't matter how crazy it is, how minute it is. It could be anything. We'll take about another minute. And for those of you that are thinking, I didn't have time to prepare and think about this, you don't need to worry about that aspect of it. I will tell you, your brain's been thinking about this for weeks, and if not months, if not the entire year. Whatever comes out right now, more than likely is the most important thing to you. So just let your brain do the work. Don't worry about it. Just get it down. We're going to filter it and go from there. Sounds like someone's playing Pac-Man. I love it. Okay. All right, so we're done with that. So if you've only gotten one thing down, that's great. Great. If you've got 10 ideas, that's fine as well. I'm going to show you how to force rank these things. So force ranking is simply the way of getting them prioritized in a way that you can then use to kind of go into your next quarter. So you kind of see at the bottom, if you can kind of see it, force ranking, what I want you to do is take everything you wrote down and just kind of look at them for a moment and say, okay, which ones are A's? A's would be things that have to get done in the next 90 days. And you only want to have, again, a couple of A's, maybe 2, 3, 4 at the most, ideally 2 or 3. B would be, okay, it would be great to get it done, but it's not critical, right? So it's something else maybe you can get done, but if I don't get it done, it's not the end of the world. And then if you still have stuff left over from there, you can assign it to a C. So C's are simply things, so I get all my A's done, I get through my B's, and I got some time left over, and I still got another couple of weeks in the quarter, then great, you kind of want to get those done. So again, rank everything A, B, and C if you have any left there. Then within the A's, you're simply going to look, okay, which one, if I have 3 A's, which one's the most important? A1, A2, A3, okay, and so forth, same with the B's. Let's take about a minute to do that if you can. All right, so hopefully you're kind of wrapping that up, just another few seconds. And again, you can go back and do this again. And as a reminder, I'm going to put all the tools that we use in our team in the chat. You can download it and Tom will have it and he can forward it to you. And if anyone's interested, I'm also going to put a copy of the presentation up there as well. All right, so now you're looking at a list. Ideally, it's a list of, I don't know, 5 to 10 items. They're sort of ranked from A, the things you want to get done. Your A1 is going to be your top priority for the first quarter of 2021, right? And so kind of just look at that and reflect and go, if I really got that done, if I got that A done, maybe A2, A3 done, how would I feel if I was talking to John 90 days from today? And hopefully you're feeling good about it, all right? So now for those of you that are kind of freaking out, I have a whole list of things, and John, you're going to make me only get 1 or 2 or 3 things done. Don't worry about it, right? We have a tool called the parking lot. We all have the same tool. You have the tool, I have the tool, we all have the tool. So it's the parking lot. So all those ideas you don't get to, what I do throughout the month and throughout the quarter is literally my partner, and she's on the call, Cal, will come and say, hey, I've got this great idea. We'll start talking about the idea. And I go, that's a fantastic idea. And I'm not saying we're never going to do it, just not now. So you all get brilliant ideas throughout the day, throughout the weeks. Create a little parking lot. Mine happens to be an Excel spreadsheet. I literally have an Excel spreadsheet. I open it up, type in the idea, type in the date, and then I'll come back and I'll look when it's time for the next quarter. I'll look back at those. Okay, yeah, that seemed really cool 3 weeks ago, but seems kind of silly now. So I just get rid of it. But that way, over time, you'll build up kind of a list of cool projects or ideas you want to work on within your business. So that's your parking lot. So how does this stuff kind of get done, right? So discipline, ugly word. No one likes discipline. No one likes to talk about discipline, but we're going to talk about it just briefly. So people will do almost anything to stay in their comfort zones. If you want to accomplish anything, get out of your comfort zone, strive to increase order and discipline in your life, right? So setting goals, setting these ideas or projects really mean nothing unless you actually do something with it, right? I think we all understand that as business people. So discipline usually means doing the opposite of what you feel like doing. The easy roads to discipline are setting deadlines, discovering and doing what you do best, what's important and enjoyable to you, and focusing on behaviors or habits by replacing poor habits and thought patterns one by one with good habits. Now, I'll tell you that your mom had it right? Make the bed first. As silly as it might seem, we talk about this in every one of our classes. The Army makes you do it, your mom made you do it. But if you start off the day with a small win, like making your bed, you're going to feel a little bit throughout the rest of your day, I guarantee you. I can no longer go home and see my messy bed. I have to have it done now, which is great. All right, we're just going to talk about a couple of key disciplines here. So we've really talked about just priorities. Totally separate class we do on metrics and rhythms. The reality is you should only have a couple of priorities. You really should have 3 at the most. maybe 4 if one of them is kind of simple, but 2 to 3 is kind of the good number. Metrics are how you track your disciplines, how you're getting things done. Like, how do you set up, for example, I need to write 10 articles. Okay, great. So is that 1 a week? So I do 2 in 1 week. And so you sort of create the metrics on how you know you're progressing forward on your projects. Then rhythms are just how you get stuff done. So I'll tell you that one of the things, I'm going to share with you a couple of tools before we talk a little bit more about rhythm. This is a 90-day priority worksheet, which I want you to take from the downloads. I want you to take that number 1 priority, that A1, and you're going to write in there by March 31st, 2021, I will achieve the following. You write in there what it is. I'm going to take these actions. You're going to talk about obstacles. There's accountability in here and so forth. A great tool, and ideally you want to use this if you can. Time blocking. Time blocking is a dirty word for some people. I think people don't like to think about time blocking. They feel it's restrictive to people. I actually find it to be very freeing. And so if you do certain things at certain times during the week, you're going to find that you have a good rhythm around those things. And so, it doesn't always work. It is challenging. I have a time blocking example in the worksheets and also some tips on how to best create your time block. Always start with your personal time, family time, church time, friend time, whatever it might be. Put those things in first. Second thing would be your workout time. Take care of your body and your mind, and all the rest will follow. The last tool I will share with you is what we call the Vision Traction Organizer. I actually have it beside me all the time on my desk with us, and our team uses this as well. It's from a book called Traction, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, by Gino Wickman. Very detailed, it takes some time to get the project together, but I've shared that tool in there with you as well. So I hope you use it. So let's talk just a little bit about rhythms, accountability, and sort of getting this stuff done. We all go through life kind of on a rhythm, right? So our productivity goes up, sometimes it's down a little, and so forth. And I think a lot of people's productivity has been a little bit diminished over the last few months. And so that's natural, right? And it's energy and it's getting stuff done. But what happens when we have deadlines? And those little blue blocks there, I would encourage you to think about as when we could go on vacation, that was vacation. And so you all know that the week before you go on vacation, what happens? A bunch of stuff gets done suddenly, right? You're going along, and all of a sudden you get everything done in the last 2 or 3 days beforehand because you're scared to leave with things undone. And then you come back and it kind of goes along and you have another thing planned and all of a sudden everything gets done again. And maybe it's not vacation right now. Maybe it's a family get together, or maybe it's a nice event you're going to have with your kids, or you're going to drive to the beach, or maybe escape the mountains for a day or two, whatever that might be. I encourage you to have those kind of things. And so the reality is that if you have sort of these milestones, these posts, and it could be an accountability call with somebody every week or every few days, and it could be by email, it doesn't have to be by call. It's going to raise your level of productivity over time. All right, so that's kind of how we look at rhythm. Accountability is really important. Before many of you jumped on the call, Tom and I were having just a short conversation around accountability. And it's important to have accountability and to be responsible to somebody else. And it could be your spouse if that works for you. For a lot of people, it doesn't. Maybe it's a business partner, which is good, or a team member, or to someone else entirely. When we do these events live, we would actually make people kind of stand up and walk around the room and find someone to connect with those person, and we could all do that as well. But the idea of accountability is simply have someone else that you kind of raise your hand up and say, hey, I committed to do 3 things this week, and I got it done or I didn't get it done, or I need some help around this. And it could be as simple as an email check-in once in a while. Okay, so accountability is in there as well. There's some accountability tips in the download I'm gonna get to you. So what's the secret, the real secret to all of this, right? So I'm gonna share the secret in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I think we all know there is no secret, right? So the high likelihood is you may not do anything, right? And I hate to say that, but it's very easy to go back to our lives and go back to the rhythm we're existing in, right? The status quo, it has its own energy. It's really hard to move out of the status quo, especially if you're successful and doing well, or you feel like you're doing great. I mean, it's really tough. And that's where that whole resistance thing, that fear kind of comes in again. All right, so once we accept that there is resistance, and once we understand that it's kind of in our lives, then maybe we can start to move away from that and move a little bit more towards that peak. And all of this comes from mindset at the end of the day. right? So it's easy to have tools. There's a lot of tools, and you've seen all this stuff probably in the past, once or twice, or maybe 20 times, but it's all about how do we get it done? And that really is about mindset. And so mindset is really about resistance, right? And right now we've all been impacted by COVID, right? So it's the first time ever that the entire world is experiencing the same thing at one time. And that's been great for 9 months that we're dealing with it, and we can share these ideas and so forth. But I'm going to tell you that it's time to get out of it. Let's get back to working, doing the things we need to do, and to create the life we want to create, right? And so that's all about change. And we know that a lot of people fear change. They're scared of change and so forth. And I'm not really sure why. It's just resistance again, because we like the status quo. And it's energy. It's like, how do we keep our energy up? And change, I will tell you, is just energy. And we define these things. Fear is energy, but we've defined it as something negative as opposed to something positive, right? And so it's just a different level of energy. So if we accept that it's there, if we accept that this fear is out there at the end of the day, that's the first step, just accepting it. And I always like to say that well, my family hears me say this all the time: be here now, be elsewhere later, right? So to be here right now. It's been really challenging to be in the moment, to be present, because of the stuff, the anxiety that we're feeling in the news and so forth. But I'll tell you, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. It doesn't really matter what's going to happen in the future. We need to be focused on right now. And that's all about your mindset. So the other morning I was out for my kind of morning walk, which I try to get in a few times a week. And it was pretty early. I think it was maybe 6:30 or something. And literally out of the building where I currently live comes a mom and her, maybe her 9-year-old son. And keep in mind, this is pretty early in the morning. And they're putting on, and they already have on their rollerblades, and they're going rollerblading at 6:30 in the morning. And it's Tuesday. And my brain immediately went to, well, what are they doing? You can't do that. It's Tuesday. You need to go to work. You need to get your homework done and whatever else. And then I started reflecting back on what that really meant, that the universe had put this right in front of me at this exact moment. I said, that's really interesting, because they don't care what someone else is doing. They're going to go and live their life. And if their life is fun right now and rollerblading at 6:30 in the morning, they should go do that. So guess what? I think we're in a world now where all the rules are made to be broken. And if you want to go rollerblading on Tuesday afternoon at 3, go rollerblading on Tuesday afternoon at 3 or at 6 in the morning, whatever you want to do it, right? So the rules are kind of out the window right now. And I think this is an interesting new challenge for us to kind of experience. And I'll tell you that you can't live life at all unless you can live fully right now. And that means right now, being present in the moment and making a decision in the next hour or 2 hours about what you're going to do for the next part of your couple of days, right? So planning is just planning. At the end of the day, so once you've done the plan, it's great. We do plans, we put these things together. You now have a list of 8 or 10 things. You'll do a little bit more work to kind of get them organized and kind of get them into some tasks and so forth from there. But then let go of it, right? Let go of the attachment to the outcome and just say, here's the plan. It's my guardrails. I'm gonna kind of go forward day to day to day. And so I like this quote from Joseph Campbell: we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. And I think we all have a really interesting life coming in front of us in this next couple of years. Another concept that I find really fascinating is this concept of the horizon. And so we see these train tracks, and right in front of us are the train tracks. We know the width, we can understand how far they are, and then you look all the way down to the horizon. They look like they're getting closer and closer and closer and closer, right? But are they really ever getting closer? We can go down that railroad track and we know intuitively that they're the same width all the way along, but we see something out there, so we sort of drive forward. And so I think a lot of people, that have done, modestly and done well in life kind of have this thing. They're always striving for something more, but the horizon is always going to be out there. We know this. It's always going to be out there. There's always something more to strive for. There's always more stuff, more things, more money, more all these kind of things. And maybe we need to think about what's right in front of us right now, especially right now. So I'm going to go through a couple of quotes here, but let's see. Can we live right now? The drive for future accomplishment just builds up the habit of always striving for something other than what we have right now, right here and right now. The result is that even when we reach our goal, we're still being driven by those habits to look for the next thing. And is that the way we want to go through life? Always looking for the next thing. Doubt. To choose doubt as a way of life, as a way to live life, is like choosing immobility as your primary form of transportation. Not a great way to go through life. So I'm going to ask you to think about a couple quick things around fear or uncertainty or the unknown or resistance. What are you putting off right now out of your fear? What do you really want to work on that you haven't worked on this year? What we fear most is most often what we need to do right now. And what does it cost you not to take action? And it could be emotional, it could be financially, it could be physical. What does it cost you not to take action? That's the cost of not having action. If you don't take action now, what will my life be like in 1, 5, or 10 years? So maybe that project you've not been working on, that you've been kind of thinking about doing, what's it going to look like if you just don't do anything right now? And risk is best defined as the likelihood of an irreversible negative outcome. And inaction is the greatest risk of all. So again, going all the way back to what Jeff McCausland told us, that action is what's key, right? That OODA loop, the last piece, act now. So procrastination, whatever the answer is tied to being afraid. And everyone is afraid of something. Reality is we're all afraid of something. It's just a matter of accepting it, realizing it, and then moving forward. And then confidence is the ability to transform fear into focused thinking, communication, and action. Again, focused thinking, communication, and action. There's that word again. With results, weaknesses become strengths, obstacles become innovations, and setbacks become breakthroughs. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation. There's going to be a lot of breakthroughs and a lot of strengths built up in the next year or two. And I want us all to be part of it. And again, we know this is simple, but it's not easy, just like the choice between the healthy choice and the not so healthy choice, as my burger sits here to the right of me for eating after this thing, with French fries, I hope. But that being said, I appreciate it. Tom asked me earlier when I had that image of peak on the very thing, if that was me on the top of that peak, and it's not. But it encouraged me to quickly go look and find a picture of myself. So here's myself at 10 when we lived in Nepal, and there's Mount Everest behind us, and that's my dad. And so that wasn't my peak. I just thought I'd share that picture with you. All right. So I'm not sure where your peak is, but I believe it's nearby. And I think if you take the tools that we talked through today very quickly and use those tools, you'll be able to make next year a fantastic year. So thank you very much. I'm sure we have time for some questions. And again, I'll put the links up into the chat in just a moment.
Great job. Thank you so much. That was very well done. Very well done.
You're welcome, Tom.
Are there any questions? I mean, what I appreciated is how you pulled together what we tried to do this whole last quarter in terms of these talks, and I really appreciate that, John. You know, I think the hardest thing to do is to set priorities and stay to them. I mean, you know, you write them down and put them in front of you, but then something pops up and you all of a sudden, how do you hold the line, you know?
Well, first we accept that's going to happen, right? Life happens, things happen every day, and we get thrown off track, and that's perfectly fine. So the idea of having our priorities, our rocks, and the guardrails there is what allows us to come back to it. So it's fine. So you're working through something, you had something planned on Tuesday, and something happens personally or at business, and you're just thrown completely off. That's fine. Let it go. It's totally fine. And come back the next time you have a chance. Come back. Hey, here's my priorities. I pull out my list, which you can't quite see, and start all over again. And that's fine. And again, that's why 90 days works so well, because things are going to happen, right?
And you visited.
Shit happens.
Yeah, right. And you revisit this like weekly, right? You sit down and look at these things that you create weekly.
I will tell you that our team rhythm, and Cal and David who are on the call can share with you, and Sophie, that we do every Monday morning. We go through our projects. Everyone has 3 to 4 little projects. We go through them. Are we on track or off track? So this is our accountability piece. If we're off track, what's getting in the way? And 9 times out of 10, I think you all know the answer to this. What 9 times out of the way, it's us. It's not meeting. It's not sitting down to kind of go through there and just creating a time. It's always about, oh, there they are. There's Dave and Cal had to turn on the picture over there. So that's it. So it's about the time, right? And setting a time block to say, we're gonna meet Wednesday at 3 and work on this for 1 hour, whatever it might be. That's our rhythm.
Are there other questions? You're welcome to raise your hand if you wish.
I'm gonna
weigh in.
I muted my camera while unmuting my microphone. So, John, I want to know how old were you while you lived in Nepal, and how did it help wire you?
Oh, good question. Okay, the easy part, I was there in 5th grade. I was 10 years old. And the reason we were there, if anyone's curious, my dad's a civil engineer. And so most of his work was done in overseas, third world countries. He's a civil engineer and worked on water treatment plants. So it was all municipal type of work. And we were there for a year. And actually, interesting enough, right after that, we moved to Arcadia, California. So that's a big transition from Kathmandu to Arcadia, California. So how did it influence my life? I say this quite often, actually. So it showed me a part of the world I think not a lot of people get to see. Even though I was very young at the time, growing up overseas, when I moved to the US, we moved to a city like Arcadia, which is a great community, but it's very insulated, right? And so, and even Los Angeles in some ways is very insulated. And Southern California is very insulated. And you meet people that have never been from the west side of LA to the east side of LA. And oh my gosh, why would you do that? You know, so all it gave me was a perspective on the world is much wider. You know, a trip to Phoenix is not like the other side of the world. Even New York is not the other side of the world. So I encourage everyone to travel, and I'm sure you're all doing all that kind of stuff. So that was my takeaway from that.
I love it. I actually grew up overseas from age 8 to 14. And
I love it.
the same thing that I say to other people is absolutely shaped how I perceive the world, how I interpret the world, how I view possibilities and options and choices. So
it's not great. What a great lesson, right? And if you can't, and people say, well, we can't do that. And it's more difficult, I think, these days to do that sort of thing. But there's other ways you can get those same experiences, right? Learning and traveling and reading and just all that stuff's all possible, especially now.
So when you have a new member of your team join,
yeah,
how do you approach? You and I have been in presentations where you've presented material before. So there's a lot of these puzzle pieces here. If you have someone new join your team, how do you warm them up and incorporate them into learning the tools and using the tools?
Great question. Because we're going through it right now with Sophie, who's new to our team. We're about 2 months in. We just jumped in. I mean, we're sort of, because we have our meetings already established, she just became part of the meetings. We haven't gone deep into the next, we're going to head in, we actually have a team meeting next Friday to talk about our next quarter. And so typically 2 or 3 weeks before the beginning of the next quarter, we'll sit down and create those rocks or those priorities. And so Sophie will have to pick 2 or 3, and she's been given a couple right now. So we said, these are projects that are important to us. These are the ones that you're in charge of. And just because you're in charge, one thing I'll point out that if you do have a team, you're working with a team, just because you have 5 projects and so forth, and maybe you give Bob is in charge of this particular project, doesn't mean Bob has to get all the work done. It means that Bob is responsible for making sure the work gets done. He may need other people on the team to do things, but at the end of the day, he has responsibility for it. And so every week when we say, are we on track or off track, Bob might say, I'm off track because Linda still owes me X, Y, or Z. So that's kind of it. But we incorporate it into it and just kind of make it part of our culture over time.
Do you have them read Traction or any of the other books as part of their onboarding process with the organization?
Cal and I have read all the books. I'm having my son David, who works with us, make his way through the books, but I don't intentionally do that. It's probably a good idea.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so if there's no other questions, we try to keep it to 45 minutes, and we're bumping up against that. Our next speaker is our last speaker of the year, which is my sister Jessie Grotehouse, who's an immunologist, who will talk about the latest updates on COVID from a scientific point of view. There will be no politics. There'll just be what the science is. We don't record it because the meeting, her conclusions may change the next day. So if you're interested, she does this about once a month, and she's going to do it for our group, but she does it other places too. Also, I'm going to be sending out a little survey, seeing if people enjoy these talks. I'd love to know. It'll be very simple. Keep going. I'm not interested. I just want to see if it's worth doing it again in Q1 of 2021. If you don't make next meeting, I want to wish you guys all a great holiday. All this will be up on my blog by the end of the day, video and John's presentation. And have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, happy holidays.
Bye.